Guys, we were having some technical difficulties. I blame Ray.
Oh, rude.
All right, here, let me open it on my thing, then we can get started.
Triple Crown.
Let's let everybody get in. Not me getting ads on my own stream.
No, that's so
Okay,
sad.
there we go. Okay, guys. Hello, everybody. My name is Jacob Zirkle, and welcome to episode 2 of the Post Room podcast. I am joined by the lovely Rae Jenkins today, and we're going to have a lot of fun talking about some visual effects, talking about our life experience, and all that stuff. Welcome to the stream, Dead. Rae, if you want to introduce yourself
Yeah,
and tell a little bit about where you come from.
sweet. I'm Rae Jenkins. I also graduated from FSU College of Motion Picture Arts with a specialization in visual effects. I am a visual effects artist and compositor. I really enjoy compositing. But I've been working at a studio for the past 2 years and recently have been starting the freelance world and really enjoying it. But the studio I worked at was Soapbox Films, and I did really love that too. Yeah.
Sweet. So yeah, I love that I have you on today, Rae, because we're gonna be getting into freelance versus studio. As my audience always knows, I am a freelance artist through and through. I've been doing this for about 2 years now, which is kind of, well, is that right? 1.5 years, we'll say.
Yeah.
But freelance is so great, and we're gonna talk about kind of the pros and cons and just talk about some of the stuff that we've been through. So yeah, so first of all, Rae, let's talk about kind of where you come from, like how you got into the industry, first of all.
Yeah, so I when I was in like high school, I was really into animating, editing, everything like that. Like a lot of people starting to film, learning the entire Adobe suite, going through all like the film classes at my high school, and then going to FSU Film. When I started there, I thought I wanted to be like a camera operator and like camera stuff, but then I don't know, I quickly realized like I love visual effects because I love animation and live action, and it feels like the blend where those two worlds collide. But yeah, after school, I had some like help from my professors and just kind of cold called a bunch of studios and applied to a bunch of studios, worked with connections I had, and that's how I started at Soapbox. And I worked there remote the whole time. So I was lucky because I could live in Florida where it's way cheaper while I was working for a place in LA. So that was really cool. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. And that's pretty much how I got into the industry, was through the film school. I think I wouldn't have had as much luck if I didn't have the connections that I built there.
Yeah, of course. And if you guys missed the last podcast episode, I talked a little bit about my background in the film school. So Rae and I were not in the same class per se. We were a year separated there, but we were kind of like, I kind of followed in your footsteps. Like I was many times my classes were like, oh, your our class is Rae, right?
Oh, I'm
Like
so honored.
so if you guys don't know, we went to Florida State Film School. There you kind of have to like specialize in a thing. Most people pick director, of course. Boring, right?
Yeah,
uh
directing, writing.
but we picked visual effects, and so with that we like got we were basically run as like a studio. We learned all of the kind of ins and outs of visual effects. That's actually where I learned Nuke. I
Yeah.
started learning Nuke. I have a lot of people on my in my audience that are like battling between like Nuke or like After Effects and stuff like that. We'll get into that later. I don't want to cross bridges yet because we have some interesting stuff to say about Nuke and what you should decide there. But that's just a little bit of background of how I know Rae, and yeah,
Yeah.
sweet. So very interesting. Let's get into the topic of the day. Um, Freelance versus studio. What kind of made you choose studio route versus freelance? Was that ever in your kind of ballpark, or like what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I chose studio route because I think I was a little scared of freelance route at first because I don't know, I'm very much like a stability person. I wanted like that adult, like freelance is that. I know that now. But when I first started and diving into what I should do, I think I chose studio for that reason and because I wanted to like continue to build my network a little bit more, so like coworker camaraderie and all of that stuff. But a big part of it was also like health insurance and 401k provided. That those are good benefits, I won't lie. But I ended up not being the best for networking. Like I still like made connections through that job for sure, who are I would consider my friends now. But since I wasn't physically in LA and I was one of the only people not physically in LA, there was kind of a difficulty there because I was remote and it's harder to make those really good connections over a computer screen. So yeah, but that's definitely why I went studio route, and so that I could know that I had this kind of stability, like certain hours a week kind of thing. But it really turned into a lot more hours, a lot of overtime.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's very common within this
Yeah.
industry and a lot of film industries to begin with, is like the idea that overtime is ingrained into our service that we provide is like something that is an unfortunate reality. But coming from freelance, right, like the nice thing about freelance in my opinion is I'm my own boss and everything like that. And actually, Rae is a recent freelance turn thing. We'll get into the reasons why a little
Yeah.
bit later. But yeah, I mean, freelance, you get to pick your own hours. Like I was telling her, kind of pitching to her to get into freelance all those months ago, of
Yeah.
like hey, like honestly, on some of these projects I'm only working like 4 hours a day and stuff like that, just because whether they need to turn over footage or I'm waiting on somebody. But in my contract I'm still contracted for those full days, and so really it's like you're almost getting paid to work half the day, but still getting paid to for that full day. Now, the unfortunate thing that Rae talked about, that's a possibility in that studio industry that's not really. Sometimes you'll see it in the freelance space, is the idea of overtime.
Hmm.
And so overtime is something that's a little bit finicky. This is something that if you are your own freelance artist, I would highly recommend you talk to whatever client you're working with and trying to get that out of the gate. Just because in the freelance world, at least in my experience, I'm not tracking time. Like I don't keep time sheets. I don't clock in, clock out, anything like that. And so some days I might work over that 8 hour day and not realize it, and then all of a sudden I'm not getting overtime pay, right? And so
Yeah.
that's the, I feel like, unfortunate thing, is you got to be diligent, right? Like I feel like you and I are like perfect for this line of work, because like we don't need, we or maybe I'm speaking for both of us, but for me at least, I don't need like somebody to watch over me. I can make my own schedule and keep to that, and all that stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And yeah, the guaranteed overtime is nice for sure. But I will say with the studio route, especially now in this like current state of the industry, it's really difficult to get the rate that you deserve because of the pandemic and the strikes, and like visual effects right now is like kind of just now feeling the strikes of the actor strike and the writer strike and all that. So it's a tough time to really fight for yourself. I think it may be easier if you're at like a crazy senior, you've been doing it for 30 years position, but with freelance, you never have that problem. I feel like people always are respecting my rate, and maybe we'll negotiate based on the project or what's needed. But that's a really nice thing. But yeah, like Jacob said, if you can work with the client, overtime could be something. I personally do kind of like to clock my hours when I'm doing freelance, not like to a T, like I don't let them know, but just for me to keep track of how long I'm spending on something, because I like to make sure it doesn't take me, like I'm not overspending time on like one shot or something like that.
You're just calling me out, right? You're like,
Sorry.
Jacob, you gotta clock your hours. What are you doing? What do
No.
you use for that? Just out of curiosity.
I use this app called Clockify. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. It's really like easy. It's just like a website, and you just like press go, press pause when you're taking a break, press go again. But I just think it's helpful for me personally because I love working quick. So speed's my name. So I like to see how fast I can get something done. Like if I'm rotoing something that's like hellish to roto, I'm like, all right, let's see how long this takes me. So that way I can, or roto paint, like from our last project, I can see how long it's actually taking me, and then if it's improving. I don't know. That's just my own
Yeah,
personal
no, I
thing.
mean that totally makes sense, because also that's like power when not only negotiating but marketing yourself as well, because you kind of know, hey, how long this takes me. And if in my opinion, that kind of knowledge is power in terms of like, if you can get like 4 shots done a day when you're negotiating with these guys, these clients and stuff like that, you can utilize that. And maybe you can get you can get 4 shots done a day of this skill level, right? And so then
Mm-hmm.
you can maybe pitch for a little bit more days and give yourself a little bit more cushion, versus like the studio route. Somebody else is doing that for you, right? Like
Yeah,
somebody else is
exactly.
determining, hey, Rae can do it in 4 shots a day. And so it's kind of nice there, to be able to do that
Yeah.
yourself.
That's one thing that I definitely love about freelance is there's a lack of this like crazy pressure. Like we both like Jacob was saying, like I feel like I don't need someone over my shoulder telling me blah blah blah. But it is more stressful when someone is, and they're like, "No, we said you could do 6 shots a day, and I have like an 8 hour day." And they don't want me to do overtime sometimes, so it's like, really, I got to get 6 shots in 8 hours. And it would be like just stressful sometimes because I'd be like, they'd be harder or like than we thought they would be or something like that. And then some days I get done 8, and then the other days I get done 4. So it's definitely that pressure to like really get everything done as quickly as possible. Where with freelance, I feel like that can happen, but there's usually a little more slack and leeway of like, don't crazy rush this stuff because you don't want it to look bad.
Yeah, exactly. We can talk a little bit about the project that we just worked on, the feature film.
Mm-hmm.
We can't mention any of the specifics, of course. We're still under NDA there.
Yeah.
But Rae and I did work on a short film that is coming out soonish. We had a lovely experience. I'm trying to remember. So basically, what happened was I was contracted by this guy, and he needed like more help for this film. And so he's like, "Hey, Jacob, I need." He was mainly looking for CG artists and stuff like that. So I was doing CG and comp at the time, and I was like, "Hey, instead of that, I know this comper friend, and she can do all the comp while I'll do all the CG, and we can kind of run it through that, because we were very low CG artists at the time." And so that's kind of how I brought you on. And I gotta apologize to you, Rae. I remember in the project, when pitching you to him, I accidentally mentioned that you came from working with the Muppets
Yeah.
TV series, and so you're the queen of roto, you're the queen of cleanup. And
Yeah.
as soon as that left my mouth, I was like, oh man, what did I just do? And so
Strangely.
I feel like I typecasted you a little bit on that project.
No,
But
that's okay. I mean, I know my strengths. I have more than those strengths, but I'm good at cleanup for sure. I can clean up really quick, and anything you want cleaned up, it'll get cleaned up. But yeah, it was funny seeing how many of the cleanup shots that I was given, and definitely with how much cleanup was needed. I was like, oh boy.
yeah,
But
so
it got done.
cautionary tale to you guys,
Yeah.
make sure if you're pitching yourself as a cleanup person, make sure you enjoy some cleanup.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
everybody has to do
Definitely.
it eventually. So
Yeah, I mean, cleanup is something that's needed on every single project. Like, no matter how high level it is. Like, yeah, cleaning up the Muppets was like obviously mostly cleaning up their Muppet puppet stuff, right? Like their puppeteers and rods. But there was also so many random things we had to clean up, and it's just like a high budget, project. Like there'd be fully crew members in the background or walkies on the table, and we'd be like, who's looking at this screen right now, checking this?
yeah, exactly. No, I mean, what would you say was in your experience? Because I have the experience of like working solo, right? So like freelance. My start was very much they were contracting me to do the compositing, the CG, even sometimes like the edit and color and stuff like that. In terms of you and like some of the other people you worked around, what was kind of some of the entry level work that you were doing at the time, and what eventually led you to be, more of a intermediate level quote unquote artists, if you will?
Yeah. So when I started there, I started as a visual effects apprentice because I had just gotten out of school. But that was only for I think it was like my title was that for like 3 months, or 6 months. But after 3 months, they started giving me actual full, like just do the whole entire shot kind of thing. But when I first started, it was like I was doing prep work for the visual effects artist. So like if he needed a mat, then I would provide that. If he needed something to be wrote out or something to be tracked, like really just like basically doing one step of the process for somebody to save them some time as entry level work. Then there was also like kind of labeling, organizing, shot grid or whatever the project's using for looking at all of the media and all the versions. But yeah, that quickly shifted into, all right, we're just going to give you shots, like do this many a day. And then that was, full keys or like full cleanups, whatever they needed, in like CG integration or just making something blow up or something like that. So it was really cool to move on to that because I didn't entirely love just like doing mats or like rotoing a hand for 2 hours. That was writing on paper in a close-up. But yeah, it was really fun to like fully do shots. And then eventually that turned into like, because we worked a lot for Disney, so like making their TikToks and like I would be in charge of like full TikToks or doing promo stuff for Paw Patrol or whatever. So
Paw Patrol.
Paw Patrol. So it got really fun. I really enjoyed that shift. I felt like I had more independence, and now, yeah, I can fully label myself as a visual effects artist and not a junior visual effects artist.
There
And
you
that's
go.
pretty cool.
Isn't that kind of like the barrier of entry, you would say, of like once you can break past that entry level point, you finally like, oh, I can call myself a junior, or like, do you,
Yeah.
is that kind of it, or do you think like after like even juniors are a little bit held back in that extent? What do you think there?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if this fully answers your question, but I think a big part of calling yourself like differentiating from junior to artist is experience in a program. And I think for studios, particularly Nuke. So
Mm.
when you feel like you're more confident in Nuke and like you can, fully do it by yourself, you don't need to ask questions or need help on like, oh, what does this node do? I think that's when that shift really happens. And I mean, there's so many things in Nuke. So even as like an intermediate visual effects artist, you might be Googling like, what the hell is this? Because there's like just random nodes you'll never use before. But that's probably a big part of the shift. And we still use After Effects sometimes, but mostly just for motion graphics side of work.
Gotcha.
But
And this goes on to, I guess, the next topic I wanted to talk about, of like some comments I've been getting recently from the YouTube channel, is like people asking, hey, I've learned Blender. I feel like I'm pretty confident there, and my CG is fine, but why do my shots not look realistic? And so I wanted to talk about today of like why pick Nuke over After Effects, because
mhm.
you and I were very similar in the fact that like I remember you did I think most of, if not all of your thesis film on After Effects. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. I was a new cater in college.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But because I came from a After Effects background as well, right? Because I had the Adobe Suite, student discount, all that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like honestly, I would say, and you can probably echo similar things. Like after I started learning Nuke, my quality went so much
Yeah, it
higher.
skyrocketed
And
for sure.
so, for my listeners that don't know what Nuke is, it's the industry standard compositing software. Compositing is basically the step in the visual effects process that you combine all of the CG mats, everything to make it look realistic. I find a lot of people, a lot of beginner visual effects artists don't understand compositing fully. So, could you
Mhm.
kind of break down your thoughts on compositing and like why it's so necessary in the
Yeah.
process?
I mean, I always think of compositing like you get all these little puzzle pieces for visual effects and you have to put them all together so it all blends and makes sense. And the putting together part of the puzzle, that is compositing. Like the shot will not look good if you just have the CG or if you just did the key, but like putting those two together is the chef's kiss of it. I really enjoy compositing because it always feels like a puzzle. Like there's so many different ways to composite a shot, but it's picking which one's the most effective, which one's the fastest, and yeah, we'll just have the highest quality at the end of the day. But I really enjoy it. I think it's so much fun. I love throwing things together.
Yeah, I mean, compositing, in my opinion, is like the one step of the process. Probably in my, like, honestly, the most important step of the visual effects process. I find too many people, I come from a Blender background. This channel is kind of a Blender focused background, and so CGI and all that stuff. What a lot of Blender artists and CG artists don't understand is like, hey, this isn't the final step of the process. I find too many people like will render straight out of Blender and not do any compositing. They're literally just like putting the CG layer above the footage and calling it a day. And then they come and they're like, why does this not look realistic and stuff like that? And that's really the concept of compositing, like why it's so necessary. And Nuke, I hate to say this, right? But Nuke is the best program. It should be your ultimate program if you want to get better at visual effects. Nuke should be a program in your kind of in your line of sight, just because of how good it really
Yeah,
is.
and fast. It's so quick. The like render engine in it is also really quick. I've realized, or I've noticed, it uses less RAM than After Effects, which I also enjoy. So you can do 2 Nuke renders at once, and your computer won't explode most of the time. Most of the time. But I really love Nuke. Like I was saying to Jacob, when I was in college, like our professor Ron Hahn kept getting me to get into Nuke like every month, and I'd be like, no, like Nuke, what? And I was so After Effects focused. But in my senior year, I was like, okay, fine, let me look into this. And I guess the challenge for switching to that is it's so different. Like it's node based, and you're kind of doing it. It's almost like After Effects but manual. But that gives you more. Like you can get so more nitty gritty with all of your shots and your details. And now I only love Nuke, and I love making it look pretty. Jacob knows that.
Yeah, I would send her one of my projects, and she would like send it back like all like organized and
Yeah,
pretty and
like
colors and all
perfectly
that stuff.
typed. Yeah, yeah. But no, I really really love Nuke, and it's like, for example, keying. Doing green screen in After Effects versus Nuke is a dramatic difference. Like the detail you can get in Nuke, the fine hairs you can get in Nuke, it's just so much better in my opinion. It is expensive, but like Jacob said, if it's something you can look to in the future and try to save up for, they do have the Nuke Indie. I think
Yeah, I was gonna talk about that. Like Nuke, I think gets a bad rap for being industry standard, and it's only meant for professionals, all that stuff. They see the Nuke X price tag and they're like, "Holy crap!" How does
yeah.
anybody afford that? And what I would say to you guys is they offer many different things. I think number one, if you just want to try the program, right? Like After Effects offers a trial version. That's totally fine. You can get it in, trial that, whatever. Nuke actually offers a non-commercial version. And so this is for people who just want to be educated by the program, maybe learn it some, and it's totally free, right? You can't use it for any commercial stuff like the name suggests. But on the other side of the coin, Nuke also offers Nuke Indie. And so that, I believe, is like $500 a year.
Yeah, it's
So
pretty expensive.
definitely not cheap. But compared to like if you're getting the Adobe Suite, I think they actually just increased the price of like the Creative Cloud, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did. I think the end of the year value is not that big of a
Oh,
price
it's
difference.
I remember when it was so cheap. It was like 400 something a year. Now it's like crazy. But all of that to say, you can get Nuke Indie for cheaper. Now the drawbacks is of course you can only render to 4K. So if you're working on
Hmm.
like big budget stuff, I've even worked on some shows that were like 6K and 8K and stuff like that. And so for that stuff, it's like you gotta communicate that if you're talking to clients, anything like that. But it's totally, I would say maybe, what would you say, like 5% of the shows that I've worked on or something are more than
Above 4. Yeah,
4K. Yeah.
exactly. I don't usually get projects that are above 4K. And when I do, I'm always kind of like, why? 'Cause it's like I get it, like HD snobs, but I think the difference there is so not obvious to the average viewer.
Yeah. Um, Daggy Z says Nuke is hard and needs time. I agree. It's
It's
hard.
hard.
It's hard, especially if you don't come from a node-based background. I think the benefit that I maybe had over you, Rae, was I came from Blender to where our materials use nodes,
Yeah.
and some other things use nodes. So I'm also a very visual person, right? Like my biggest problem with After Effects is the layer system. Like
Mhm.
you can do two of the same composite, right? You do one in After Effects, you do one in Nuke. You give that to a another artist, and they will immediately be able to tell what you're doing inside of Nuke. Versus After Effects, everything is kind of hidden in like subset menus. You know, all of the effects, the mask, all that stuff you have to dig through. And especially being a layer based thing, I've seen like 50+ layer comps, and
Yeah.
not only is that a pain to have to organize, but also, like you were saying earlier, it takes a lot of power to do that.
Yeah, it takes so much power on your engine, and also, I feel like Nuke is way better at being collaborative. So if you're working on a project with somebody else, like when I was in the studio, we would constantly be sending Nuke scripts back and forth because, like, hey, maybe they need this shot for the next one or something like that, or like they want to use the same effects. Like it's so much easier to just copy over a process from Nuke to a different shot. It definitely is hard. I struggled with it because I had never used a node-based program before. But I ended up loving that because, like Jacob, I'm also a visual learner. So seeing it visually out instead of like diving through pre-comps and layers and all this stuff, it's just way more easier to me. I like to see like a map. But I have definitely had some insane looking Nuke scripts. I'm sure Jacob has too that are just like massive.
And it
Um,
runs so well, right? Like if I did that
yeah,
inside of After Effects, it would be like I have a decent machine, and even that it would like, kind of freeze up sometimes, especially working with like I don't know what the wizards at Nuke are doing, but like even sometimes when I was working with like 6K B-raw
mhm.
footage, like it was playing back so smoothly, and I'm sure if I
Yeah.
popped that inside of After Effects, it would have, you
It
know.
takes so much longer to view, your work in After Effects unless you're at, like, a fourth or half quality on my engine, but I can view it in Nuke at, like, full quality or just, like, a little bit in proxy mode, and boom, I'm seeing it.
Yeah, exactly. Especially the
So
preview mode, like how fast it
yeah.
caches the for previewing and stuff. It's just
Yeah.
such a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
We have a question comparing Nuke and After Effects and doing effects like superpowers. I never see Nuke doing this unless it's pre-made assets you want to composite using Nuke. So I think the difference that if we're just talking about like kind of particle effects, superpower effects and stuff like that. If you look at any of the Hollywood stuff, I actually remember watching a video of the guy who did the effects for the Superman and Lois show, the laser eye effects and stuff, and he was using Nuke. What I would say is, typically for the higher budget stuff, you almost never see After Effects in that type of stuff. If you're talking about like, I know there's some particle plugins and stuff for After Effects, and After Effects is very kind of easy for beginners, like drag and drop, if you will, for that kind of stuff. You can get the same effects and type of Nuke, and there are plugins for Nuke as well,
Oh,
right?
so many, like, millions.
And so like I'm sure there whatever you do inside of After Effects, there is a exact plugin that does it. It can even be the same plugin. I'm trying to remember the most popular particle plugin for After Effects, but I'm pretty sure they also offer the same exact plugin on Nuke.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they do as well. And the thing about that too is kind of like Jacob was saying, like it is After Effects is a little bit more easier to maybe achieve because of the drag and drop feature of like it's just there, you can just find it. And maybe in Nuke, it's something you have to maybe make yourself. But I find that being able to make it yourself gives you so much more control over what
Oh,
it
it
looks
looks
like.
10 times better.
Yeah, and you can really decide everything about it, like every quality about it, which I like. I appreciate more, and it's often helpful when you're working with clients because a lot of times clients maybe don't know exactly how visual effects works, and they'll be like, make it like more ethereal or something.
I
And I'm
hate
like,
those.
I
Oh
know,
man.
me
We'll get
too.
into that maybe after this, of like all the crappy comments or like
Yeah,
suggestions we've gotten from non VFX people. That's funny.
definitely.
But
But you can have more control over it.
yeah,
Is all I'm
exactly.
saying.
That's Nuke in a nutshell. Is like, yes, it is harder to learn. Actually, honestly, I don't think it's the what I would say that the theories behind everything are similar. I think it's just wrapping your head around nodes and like understanding how the pipelines work and stuff like that. I think the other big thing about Nuke that I love about it is that it teaches you a way of thinking that like your RGB channels are separate from your alpha channels. And
Mhm.
there's so much stuff you can do with like combining mask, combining keys, all that stuff that you can do and like reintroduce that back into the stream that you can still do inside of After Effects. But I mean, you're talking about adding like layers upon layers, blending modes, all that type of stuff. And then it just muddies up the script as well. So
Yeah.
Nuke is just great for that as well. Somebody, Space Hunter, you mentioned Nuke is $4,000 a year. It is. We just talked about that. There's Nuke Indie, which is $500 a year, which is actually cheaper if you get the Creative Cloud license. So there's that, and then there's also non-commercial that if you want to learn and kind of test the water there, there is totally that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say that is possibly a pro to studios, is that the programs are provided to you usually when you work for a studio because they can, afford that kind of stuff. But also if you're going freelance, you'll eventually get some clients and make enough to afford that, to make that sacrifice. And that's something, can't you tax write it off if
Yeah.
you're working
So
freelance?
I guess
Yeah.
I can talk about some of the monetary value there since we're on kind of that. So full disclosure, I have Nuke X. I purchased that as a freelance artist, and so that is this year is the last year I got the student discount. So I only paid 1,500 this year, which is still a lot. What I would say to you, I am fully ready to pay that full 4,000 whatever next year, just for the fact that Nuke brings in the type of clientele that I can pay for a whole like 2 years of Nuke in one project, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's very different compared to After Effects because After Effects is very much more about the consumer market, all that kind of stuff. Also motion graphics, like if you're in motion graphics, this is separate from visual effects. We kind of, categorize them as separate entities almost, I would say.
Yeah.
Motion graphics is After Effects. So
Yeah.
that's
Perfect for
gonna
After Effects.
exactly. And
You can
so
stay in there.
yeah, you're good there. But with visual effects, like the type of clients that you would be getting from Nuke would just be able to pay a lot more. It'd be a lot more intensive work and all that stuff. So that's kind of how we think about things from a freelance perspective. Is we're running ourselves as a business, and it is a business expense, right? Like I'm not going to talk a lot about this just because I'm not a professional on that sense, but I do feel like there is something to be said about bookkeeping yourself freelance. You got to do that yourself. If you're a studio or employee or whatever, the studio is kind of taking out those taxes for you. Number one, you don't have to do pretty much any bookkeeping. You didn't do any bookkeeping yourself, right? Other than just like sending pay stubs and stuff like that.
Yeah, just clocking in my hours every week. That was pretty much it.
Yeah, and so like for me, I recently had to do QuickBooks. I've been having to plug in. I had to go back over the past year to plug in everything, but that also allowed me to do expenses as well. And so this not only I even contracted Rae on a couple projects and stuff like that. So contractor payments I had to write off as an expense. Anything I bought for the business, so that would be my computer, the licenses. And so Nuke was a huge one, right? The problem, I think this is just me kind of going off a little bit, I don't know for sure, but Nuke is one of those things I think you can't write off. Or no, it's a yearly subscription, so I think you can write off that full thing a year. But for instance, for like my computer, right, that's something that's gonna last for like multiple years, so you can't
Yeah.
write off like the full money amount that first year. It's something specific of like it's depending on what it is, how much it is. It's like over the course of like 5 years. I can't
Yeah.
remember there.
Stretch out it for its lifespan, probably.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of how you start thinking of freelance. And all of that to say is that 4,000 number for Nuke becomes very small in the grand scheme of things because it makes you so much more money. Like it's an investment, right? But the return on investment, at least from my experience, was so much higher to make it worth it for me, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Okay, and then we have a question from SGH Cinema. How do you think about Fusion for compositing? Uh,
I I actually haven't really used Fusion for compositing before, so I can't really speak too much on that.
I think it's good because Fusion's free. It's DaVinci Resolve's
Oh,
compositing
okay.
thing. It's free. You can get DaVinci Studio and maybe have a little bit more flexibility in some of the stuff. I think what's good about it is it's teaching people the idea of nodes. I think because I've used it a long time ago and I've had some experience with like other artists using it and talking to me about it. I think it's fine alternative if you purely want like a free software. I think it's fine. There's nothing. It's better than Blender. Let's just say that it's better than Blender's built-in compositing software. What I would really recommend you think about is like what type of artists like you're wanting to be. Are you wanting to be more of the Hollywood, make this a career artist, or are you mostly just looking to make cool stuff of yourself? Maybe you have a film and you're learning visual effects to do that film and stuff like that. If you're the earlier one, like you want to make visual effects a career, learn Nuke non-commercial, right? Like that is it's free, right? We talked about that earlier. It is one of the biggest, the best things that you can do for your future is learn Nuke. You will be such a better, like more appetizing employee, a potential hire, right? Just because you have that skill set and it's free, right? Like it's 1080p. I think you can't do H.264, even though you shouldn't be doing that to begin with. And yeah, I mean, do you have anything to say on that front, Rae?
No, I mean, I've never used Fusion, but I will say from my studio experience, Nuke is the studio standard. So Hollywood wise, like the best way to get a job at companies or studios is to know Nuke. So like Jacob was saying, the non-commercial version is free and you can do everything on that. So you can totally practice, just, do random stuff. But if you're trying to get into entry level positions, practice Roto Paint. It's definitely amazing to Roto Paint in Nuke. I like it way more than After Effects. And as Jacob said earlier, he was labeling me the queen of cleanup,
Hey, now
which
you said it.
I'd take that. I claim that. I am good at cleanup, but I fully always only use Nuke. If I'm using After Effects to clean up, I'm like getting angry and frustrated. So
Yeah.
but yeah, just practice those things. I think beauty work's a big entry level position, mats, rotos, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then like Jacob was saying, knowing that the separateness of RGB and alpha and Nuke is really helpful for just all visual effects in the future. Like whatever you end up going into, that's like a crucial thing to like study and learn.
For sure. And it's so hard to like say that because it's such a foreign concept if you don't already like know it and experienced it, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And so real quick, I'll just this one question from I'm not even gonna try to say that name. Which software is best for camera tracking? I use Blender. Camera tracking not working. So Blender camera tracking is very finicky. It's a free program. It kind of does everything. And so if you're really looking to step up your camera tracking, I use a program called Synthesize. It's by Boris FX, and so they are an amazing company. If you've heard of Mocha Pro, they are the same people who make Mocha Pro. Now, full disclosure, I was sponsored by Boris FX, and so if you want a discount, I actually have an affiliate link. If you go to any of my YouTube videos, I'll have a affiliate link in the description. It'll give you a little bit of a discount, but also help me on the channel. But the reason Synthesize is so good is because it has so much more control than Blender ever will. Like it's a dedicated camera tracking tool, right? And so you will be able to get so much more, tracking markers, so much more data, so much faster than Blender. Blender is very rudimentary in its tracking algorithms and stuff like that. Synthesize is bleeding edge. It has a lot of support for like any type of camera you use. It'll calculate lens distortion, all that important stuff. And so that's why I recommend kind of going towards like Synthesizer, like PF Track is another industry standard one there. So yeah, that's my recommendation there.
Yeah, I also enjoy PF Track. I haven't actually used
Oh, I
Synthesize,
didn't know
but
that you use PF Track. Oh,
yeah, I've used that a few times. I don't have it anymore because it was when I was working at the studio, but that was really helpful. And then Mocha Pro, I've always loved Mocha Pro. I get what I need out of it.
Well, I
And
guess this goes to another question. For roto paint and cleanup, do you think it's better for in nuke or silhouette? Do you want to talk about your pitch for? Because I know you use Mocha for all your tracking, roto, anything needs, right?
well, I actually sometimes use it for roto, and I only sometimes use it for tracking. I do most of my tracking in Nuke. It's just if I don't have enough information, maybe the shot doesn't have enough information, I'll that's when I go to Mocha. Mocha is pretty much my last resort, but I always try to get everything done in Nuke first. I love Nuke for roto and for roto paint. I mean, it is a little meticulous. Roto is just meticulous. You just can't avoid that. Sometimes Mocha can be helpful because it can like kind of do it, but it's never clean enough. Like if you need like a sharp edged roto, Nuke. Nuke is the way to go. I always use B spline personally. It's my favorite. But like, and I always jump 5 frames, maybe if it's not that much movement, 10 frames, and then I'll go back through and make sure there's no mishaps. So that's pretty much how I always approach roto. But for roto paint, it is just so much more helpful. And Nuke, I love it. Like you can I always just use the regular old paint tool. You can do freeze frames, so say something's clean, and then you can just use that. You can go back and forward and time if this makes sense. Sorry if I'm explaining it bad, but just like say you're on frame 50, you can steal the information from frame 70. That's like perfectly for what you need, kind of thing. So I don't know. I think it's really helpful, and I also think it's a little bit more like it gives you a little bit more control over how much opacity and feather it has than After Effects, because I'm pretty sure After Effects mostly just has those like base options for the paint tool. Like I don't think you could like you can kind of adjust it, but it's not as much as you can get into the decimals of Nuke.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever had experience with paint inside of After Effects, honestly.
Yeah,
Now that I'm thinking about it, like, I never really had to paint out anything inside of After Effects,
I've done it before and it's not fun.
Yeah, and
It's not
so
as it's not as fun, and it slows it down more than Nuke does.
mm.
Like say
And that's
you're
crazy
painting
because like
something.
Roto Paint is like one of those nodes that's a little bit like a performance hit, at least in my experience. And
Yeah.
so even that performance hit is so much better than like the
Then
default like After Effects thing.
I agree. And something I'll do is, I really try to be like I try to perfect where I do my strokes. So I'm not doing like a bunch of taps because that will kill your script. But like say it's a 300 frame shot, I'm going to try to keep my strokes below 150. Obviously, that depends on what you're painting out and like how large it is or that kind of stuff. Like on one of the cleanup shots for our last project, I just ended up having to make a few different rotopaint nodes because I don't want to go over 150 in one node, or that node is just going to crash and disable itself. And then all my work's gone. So I just break it up and make multiple paint nodes. And I was still rendering pretty quickly. So it didn't crazy debilitate me.
Yeah. And we have one more thing talking about whether you should learn Blender or Maya to get jobs in studios. You can talk a little bit about your firsthand experience, but I'll just firstly say Blender is not used in the industry, pretty much at all. I will say I get some jobs inside Blender and stuff like that just because I'm freelance and stuff like that. But if you're looking purely for the studio route, unfortunately, not many people are looking for Blender specific jobs as of
Mm-hmm.
yet. And I can totally see why Blender is not a visual effects tool outright, right? Like it is a kind of everything tool. And so there are some things that are a little bit finicky compared to like Houdini, Maya, 3ds Max. Even though 3ds Max might be a little bit more obscure nowadays, I think. But Rae, can you talk about like what you saw in studios? This person specifically mentioned Maya. Do you have you interacted with artists? I know you guys had some 3D artists with Maya.
Yeah, we had some 3D artists with Maya. I mean, I'm gonna agree with Jacob there that looking up like studio standards for CG tools is probably the best bet. I know some companies, like some smaller companies, will look at the fact that you know Blender and appreciate that and use it as like a okay, we can teach this
Yeah,
person
exactly.
Maya a little easier. So it's still a leg up than knowing nothing, right? Especially in the CG world. Because personally, I don't really do CG. I'm just now starting to dip my toes into it. I focus on compositing. But I know with the CG artists we did have, they used Maya. And then for stems like Houdini, ZBrush, I think was sometimes used. I don't know if these all apply in the same way because I just don't have as much experience in them. But I will say that Blender is never used in a studio sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could also echo as well how important it is to have those skill set because it is transferable. I talked a little bit with LB about this, but in my opinion, if the price tag is what's holding you back from jumping into the world of CG, totally learn Blender. What you're gonna have happen, you're not gonna waste your time learning Blender. What is so important, and this applies a little bit to compositing, but more so to the realm of CG, is all these programs like Maya you mentioned. More importantly, I'd honestly recommend either Maya or Houdini if you're really looking for studio work. And all of those programs have the same philosophy, have the same theories behind them, all that kind of stuff. Really, when like I could easily learn a program like Maya. I could probably learn it 10 times faster than somebody who's never touched CG before. And that's because they have the same things. Like Blender has a PBR workflow for materials. And so that's how to get realistic materials. So does Maya, so does Houdini and stuff like that. And they're all the same theory. It would really, the biggest time waster, in my opinion, of learning a new program is just learning where that UI sits, where those submenus are, and maybe depending on what render engine you're using, they might have some finicky kind of new stuff there. But really, guys, like, if you learn Blender, like Blender will be able to apply to these other industry standard programs and stuff like that. Also, I just think it's a great tool for every kind of artist in the industry to know. I think there's something to be said when like I was working with another fellow, FSU person when I contracted them. They were like, hey, can you check this model or something out? And so they actually sent me the model. I think they were using like Maya or Unreal or something like that. And I was able to real quickly just throw the FBX file inside of Blender and give them some notes and stuff like that. And so I think it's a very good tool set to have because Blender is such a kind of good program for that previs stuff and everything like that, to where even if you're a comp artist or something like that, just being able to like throw something in Blender real quick if it's 3D and check it out, I think it's a very useful skill to have in your back pocket. So
yeah, I'd completely agree with that, especially the transferableness of Blender to other programs.
yeah, sweet. And so we have a question about Boris affects Silhouette. Have you ever used Silhouette, Rae?
I actually haven't. So yeah, I see that what you're saying there, that you meant that instead of AE for the Roto Paint question. I have never used VFX Silhouette. We didn't use that at the studio I worked at for a few years. We just did it all in Nuke. So I can't really speak to that. Maybe it's the standard at certain places, but I don't think all places have a specific standard on Roto and Roto Paint.
Yeah, I want to say it is the quote unquote industry standard if like you purely just need like Roto, right? Because I do have some experience with it. I'm trying to remember. I had like this one shot of like this dancing girl, and I needed like a heavy Roto because she had like a waving dress and all that stuff. And I used Silhouette. I wasn't sponsored by them at the time or anything, but Silhouette is really nice. What I like about Silhouette is it tracks because it has the same like it's very similar to Nuke in the Roto sense, right? Rae, like it's literally the same controls, I feel like. But the nice thing is it tracks, it literally like, will you do it, it'll track, and you still do those 5-frame intervals like you were saying earlier, but it'll do such a good job like tracking those 5 frames. It's almost like a combination of like traditional Roto with like Roto Brush from After Effects. You should definitely check it out if you want to do a trial or something like that. It's super sick. But the nice thing actually that I'm trying to remember, I actually did this on the feature film that we did. It was one of the shots of the girl getting well, I can't say anything, but I needed to rotoscope out a woman, and she was like flailing all over the place. Thank goodness it was like, oh no, actually that shot was some guy flailing all over the place. The motion blur was so bad. But the nice thing about Silhouette is you can export out a Nuke script, and it gives you actually like a roto node. And
Yeah.
so instead of exporting out like a mask or a matte or anything like that, you actually have control. So like what I would do is I would do it in Silhouette, and then I like go bring it into Nuke to composite. And before, you would have to then, oh shoot, there's something there that I got to get it rid of. Let me go back into Silhouette. The nice thing about that is I could do it inside of Nuke and just fix it right there, right?
Yeah, no, that's definitely helpful. I've used, oddly enough, I haven't used Silhouette, but I've used Mocha Pro and done that kind of thing. I know Boris is really great for collaborating with Nuke because it can do that. But now I'm like, dang, I should have been using that a while ago. I had this one shot where I was hand rotoing, like two people running through a room. She was wearing a dress and heels. That took me like a full day. And I'm imagining with Silhouette, it would have taken me much less time. So I think you're probably right, Kareem, that that one is better for doing that kind of thing. But I don't know if it would be better for paint. I still do really love
Oh,
painting and Nuke.
yeah.
Yeah.
Paint, I don't have an experience with Silhouette with painting, but Silhouette in the industry, or at least what I remember, is purely really meant for roto. Like I think it has that thing. And then also I think it just recently, I think number one, Synthesize recently has support inside of Mocha now. So some of the Synthesize algorithms or something are in Mocha. I'm trying to remember there. And then also I think Silhouette and Mocha work pretty well together as well. And so might be look into getting into that. But yeah, if you're purely just looking to get into like a roto house or something like that, number one, good luck. You're doing the visual effects work. We all appreciate our roto artists. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we don't have much experience there because we are like base compers instead of just roto artists, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some comments about Ace's workflow. They're specifically asking about Blender, and Blender Aces is a little like finicky. In terms of your studio experience and stuff, are you guys using like Aces workflows, or is it kind of really whatever the client like wants or anything?
So the first year I was there, it was client dependent, but then the second year I was there, we used Ace's workflow and Nuke. That was mostly just like I'm trying to remember how we set that up because it was a bit of time ago, but it was we just had to set it up like once within our pipeline. We used this app. What was it called? I can't remember. We had this app where everything was all of our shots were launched here. So we could just click it, open Nuke, and it would open Nuke for us and do it in the programmed way we told it to. So once we programmed it to Aces once, it was ready to go in the future. That can be sometimes annoying, especially if you're a little less experienced, because you have to remember to change all of your color settings or it's going to look funky or not even work. But I enjoyed Aces, but some of the grain nodes that we would use typically to add grain or remove grain wouldn't work in Ace's workflow, so we had to get new ones for that.
Color
But
management is one of the most annoying things.
yeah, I mean, I prefer personally not to use it, but I know it's technically like better or whatever. But I would just rather use the base log and then give it to the colorist
Yeah,
to,
exactly. Well,
yeah.
let me ask you this because this is my experience, but with you guys, I mean, you guys are exporting out log, right? Like you guys aren't applying any LUTs or anything like that. Like it's log to log
No,
for you guys.
it's log to log for the most part. I think for some indie directors you're working for, so not like big companies like Disney or something, just independent people, they sometimes ask for LUTs, but that wasn't ordinary.
Yeah.
Usually people had their own colorist that they wanted to dive in and do that themselves.
Sweet. And so we are coming up on our time, guys. So if you have any other questions, feel free to comment them now. We'll try to do like a rapid fire session at the end as we're wrapping up. Quickly, I just want to talk about does Blender have ACES? So technically it does. What you have to do is you have to render your CG out as a EXR sequence, either EXR or multi-layer EXR. And then once you have that, you have to go and set the color management. By default, it's set to linear Rec 709. Using EXR, you have to set it to ACES CG is the one that we like to use if you're talking about ACES. And then all you do inside of that is you go inside of Nuke, and then you have to set the or Nuke or whatever compositing program, you have to set the color management inside the program to ACES, right? And then sometimes, like inside of Nuke, you have to tell it to read in as ACES CG and stuff like that. So that's a kind of workflow for Blender specifically. It's a little finicky, I won't lie. Actually, on the feature film that Rae and I were part of, I ended up, just because of time, like this is not the industry standard way to do it at all. Just because of time, I had to render out as PNG files, and that's because they were baked out as sRGB. And for our simplicity, it's so much easier. Like that's, in my opinion, that's the biggest reason why Blender isn't widely adopted yet as a CG tool in the visual effects industry, is because it still uses sRGB. It's like an AGX view transform inside of the program, which isn't a common view transform to begin with. And so I'm sure there's a lot of background information of like why that is and stuff like that. But just know it's a little bit finicky in my experience to work with ACES and EXRs using Blender. Should I learn Fusion or After Effects is quite enough? I know After Effects, how to use it. I mean, honestly, if you're deciding between the two, Rae, I would say After Effects.
I would also say After Effects if you're deciding between the two. I mean, I think it also, like Jacob was saying earlier, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. But if After Effects is in your budget right now, and that's kind of what you already know, then I don't think there's a problem with that. But if you want to improve your skill set and improve your clientele, maybe get more higher paying clientele, then I think Nuke would be the way to go in the future. But After Effects over Fusion, I think, is probably a good choice.
Yeah, I mean, not only is I think it's a better program like than Fusion, I do think it'll lead to more jobs, right? Like even though we didn't trash on it. We were like, we might want to stick to Nuke. Even though we do that, there are more After Effects jobs than Fusion jobs and stuff like that. And I know that's kind of contradictory to what we were saying about nodes, because Fusion is a node-based thing. And so if you're wanting to learn nodes, maybe that's fine. But even if you want to learn nodes, I'd recommend skipping Fusion and going straight to Nuke non-commercial, And so, like Rae said, if you have it in the budget already, After Effects is a great tool and something that could lead to further work, right? And so,
yeah, I agree. And like I said, even at my studio, we still use After Effects. It's just we didn't use it for compositing. We only used it for motion graphics work, pretty much exclusively, or like TikTok work for people.
I'm gonna plug Rae's demo, her public demo reel, in the chat right now. So if you guys want to check that out, go tell her in the comment section Jacob sent you, all that stuff or whatever. And then she also has some more private demo reels, which I'll link here in a minute, but do require passwords, just because some of this stuff is what would you call it, Rae? Like under NDA,
like
or
all NDA protected. So after college, basically, like this reel that the first link is my college demo reel. But after that, pretty much everything I've worked on since then has been NDA protected. So I cannot show any of it publicly. I have to have it all password protected. That's with Disney, random companies like State Farm, Zillow, they kind of block you a little bit. And then some films that I was given permission to put on my reel, but that are currently in festival run. So
sweet. So if you want to check out more of her recent work, I'm gonna have to break that up. What the heck? Okay, so some of her recent work, she has a motion graphics reel that I just linked, and then also her visual effects reel. And again, this is more of her most recent work. This is the more private stuff, and so there is a password. If you just plug that password in when it gets recommended, you can check out some of her stuff. Amazing work. Can you talk about a little bit about like what you've worked on that people might know?
So I worked on Muppets Mayhem, that show that was on Disney Plus. We did the entire season for that, and it was just 4 of us artists on the whole show. So that was a lot, and a lot of overtime. I've worked on a lot of commercials for State Farm, Zillow, and what was the other commercial? Chase Banks. And then we also did some promotional materials for movies and shows for Disney, which is mostly my motion graphics reel. That was Paw Patrol, Elemental, and then their TikToks. There's just a bunch of stuff in there. But the visual effects reel is Nuke. The motion graphics reel is After Effects. And yeah, I really had a good time working on all the things I got to put in there. So
I gotta check them out again. It's been a while since I've seen them, but
yeah, I'm excited to add the stuff from what we've just worked on together
oh
when
yeah,
that's possible.
I'm hoping that before Halloween,
Me
because
too.
it was a horror film, so we'll see.
Fingers
Actually,
crossed.
I'll check after this to see if it's already
Yeah.
uploaded.
And I did just see Kareem's question about show reels. Just since we're on this topic, I just wanted to say that what Kryptonian said is a great idea. Prep, roto keying, grading. Beauty work is also really popular. So if you can do any beauty work, that's usually given to a junior, but that involves rotoing, and that's part of what he said. But that and then tracking is also pretty crucial.
Yeah, showing that you're not just a one trick pony. Also, do not, and I repeat this, do not post tutorial work to your reel. It is a big no-no, especially because I'm a tutorial-based YouTube channel. If I see any of you guys post, it's not only to protect my own work, right? Because like some of my own work also makes it onto my demo reels because I made it, but also like especially bigger studios and stuff will actually look for like some big tutorials online and stuff like that to make sure people aren't just like posting, because anybody can do a tutorial and stuff like that. And so I feel like that's a no-brainer, but I just want to point that out as like that's a big no-no that can get you blacklisted from studios, and so just be careful.
Completely. And then if you have fully composited shots that you want to show and you feel confident in, I think that's a great idea. Just do wipes to show the process. But if you're trying to get into entry-level positions, definitely show that you know how to do roto, tracking, beauty work, and keying.
What about some of the technicals you would say, like, how long it should be, all that stuff?
Oh, I would not go over a minute. Personally, that's just always been my scope there. And I think people don't look long enough for it to stay. Even sometimes they just watch the first 30 seconds. Always put your best stuff first, and then sometimes you can tail it off with something you're proud of, but you wouldn't say is like your best shot, just to keep their attention going. If you're somebody who is continuing to make your reel after having some work with maybe some more high profile clients, putting faces first can also be helpful. It's annoying that name dropping and that kind of stuff kind of works, but it really does. So if you can show that you've worked for a big face, a big company, that would be a good thing to start.
For sure. I can totally echo that, because like recently, because I'm very interesting. I work in film and all that stuff, but I also work in music videos and mostly advertising. And I could tell you when after I released a demo reel, or sorry, a show reel that had it had Reese's first, because I was contracted by Reese's. Just the fact alone that I had like Reese's on the portfolio, it might have been like, it was actually a pretty decent shot. I was pretty proud of it, but it wasn't definitely like my most insane shot I've ever done. But since I put that first, some clients, especially in the advertising space, literally hired me just based on that, like, and stuff. And so what Rae's saying is very true. It's very unfortunate that like your best work sometimes doesn't speak fully for you in terms of the business side of things, but you got to start thinking about that stuff of like, hey, this, you got to make sure the work is still good. Like, you don't want to show that you did something for Reese's and it sucks. But like just having those big names, like you having like Muppets Mayhem and stuff like that, and working with Disney and stuff, that's in many people and many recruiters' mind is so much better than like having a short film that was like the most insane shot they've ever seen in the entire world. But that shot can be like your second or third. It doesn't need to be your first, right? So
yeah, exactly. And I think it also depends too if you're sending your reels to like clients who don't know much about visual effects, or if you're sending your reels to visual effects people and visual effects houses, because I think visual effects houses might care a little less about the big faces and big names. I mean, it's still important to include in the reel, but they are going to be looking more specifically at the visual effects work, whereas clients who are hiring you might not know what to look for in that regards, other than, oh, this person obviously has experience, they've worked on Reese's, kind of thing. So
Especially like if you're sending this off to a bigger studio, it's
yeah.
like, are you sending this off to the HR department, or are you sending this off to maybe a visual effects supervisor who is looking to bring, what's the skill level of the person that you're actually sending this stuff to? And so I've had, this is the pre writer strike and all that stuff. I was actually talking with studios. I was very similar to Rae of like, I didn't want to do freelance. Like freelance was scary and all that stuff. So I was talking to these studios, and like some of the interviews that I would get would be HR people. Like I could definitely tell like, oh, they're just looking for check boxes and stuff like that. Versus like, I would get some other interviews which were more from technical people. And those HR interviews, typically what happens is HR interviews are kind of like the first step of the process. And then after that, you're handed off to somebody that might be a little bit more technically sound in visual effects. And so just kind of understand that if you do look for like interviews and stuff like that, of like how you want to pitch yourself to an HR person versus how you want to pitch yourself to like somebody that knows visual effects. And that's same with visual or freelance as well, right? Like when I talk to clients, I'm vetting them to see how experienced are they into visual effects, not only to see like how much I have to help them and assist them along the way, but also usually people who aren't versed in visual effects, like they don't understand the time frame and the monetary value that goes into it and all this stuff. And so it's always just know your audience is what I would say.
Yeah, I would agree.
Sweet. Okay, everyone. Well, that is all we have time for today. I just want to say a massive thank you to Rae for joining us. This was super fun. Is there anything that you wanted to finally talk about, or anything that we didn't get to today, Rae?
Not really. I mean, we covered all the talking points that I was thinking about, but if you want to do visual effects, definitely don't be scared by anything we said, because everybody's got to start somewhere. And yeah, good luck to everybody. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I really enjoyed being on. So thank you, Jacob.
Of course. Anyways, thank you guys for listening to the second episode of the Post Stream podcast. We will be live next week with a new guest talking about some visual effects and industry level topics. So I can't wait to see you there. But thanks for watching and listening, and I will catch you next week.